Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grace and Truth Podcast. My name is Taylor Bacon. I'm the Associate Pastor at Grace Resurrection Methodist Church.
And I'm James Williams, Senior Pastor.
And in this week's episode, we're talking about doubt. Can you doubt if you are a Christian? Is it allowed? And what happens when you do doubt? So let's dive in to this week's conversation. We've got a series of questions on doubt, but first, I think it would be helpful if you and I, James, shared any sort of moments of doubt in our own lives. I think when we open it and say, are you allowed to doubt? People might especially think, well, are pastors allowed to doubt their faith, or are they allowed to doubt in any way?
I'm in trouble.
So I'm curious if you, I'm in trouble if that's happened. So have you had any significant moments of doubt in your faith? Not necessarily just in your pastoral ministry, but in general in your life. I mean,
I can think of two times in my life. One's recent, one's a long time ago. So I was very close to my maternal grandmother growing up. She practically raised me. And my grandmother was very supportive of me, and she had a goal for me to go to college because no one else in my immediate family had gone to college. So I did, and I was so proud of that, and I wanted to make her proud. And so she got a brain tumor when I was a senior in college and died very, very quickly. And I was really struggling with God and doubt, and because my grandmother was a really good person, a good, strong Christian person. And I thought, God, why did you do that? Why couldn't she didn't get to see me walk that stage. And so it lasted for about a year, maybe. I mean, I came to terms with a lot of it, did a lot of exploration. So that was a big one. And then recently, moving from Kentucky to Georgia was a big one for me, because I thought I'd be in Kentucky the rest of my life. And then through a series of events that you're very familiar with, Taylor,
mm-hmm.
I ended up in Georgia. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. But during that interim period, I was really struggling with what I was kind of getting into with God, because I had this whole thing laid out that I thought I was supposed to do. And then I ended up in Georgia. And there was about a couple of month period where I was just like, come on, God, what are you doing here? But just like the brain tumor situation with my grandmother, I saw God work in some pretty miraculous ways through that and through this. So it's okay to have doubt, but I was always looking for the solution and God's plan. And I think when you're looking for it, you'll find it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I can only really think of one significant period or season of doubt in my life, and it was probably, I don't really want to timestamp it because I can't accurately do that, but I would just say that I was going through a tremendously stressful time in my life, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever sought counseling. And I remember sitting in that counselor's office, and when I say stressful, I mean it was just the work I was doing was extremely stressful. My immediate family life was transitioning in a lot of different ways. And so I was doubting everything. And so I think my mind just thought, well, let's just throw my faith in there as well. And so I got to a point where I'm sitting in a counselor's office and I said, honestly, I'm a pastor and I don't even know if God's real anymore, because I can't sense his presence anywhere. And it was really from there that it all just kind of built back. And I think it's because my entire life was based off of a belief that was handed to me. And it was said, you believe in God. Why? Because your parents told you to, and the pastors in your church told you to. And so growing up in church like that, I had never questioned it. I never doubted it. But I think enough of my life was tested that I finally got to a point I was like, okay, wait, hold on. Is there a God? Like, if all of this is going on, this is crazy. Is there even really a God? And so it built back from there. So I guess to move on to this is kind of a second question, but it's really just an addendum to it. But where was the church for you in that season? And really, did the church help you or hurt you in those seasons of doubt? I think that's where we can go next.
That's a great question. In the early years, the one with my grandmother, because I think I was 19 when that happened, and I was going to church. I was going to church mainly back then, though, because this very beautiful girl that I was dating said, if you don't go to church, then we're not going to be together. and so I went to church.
Solid ultimatum.
But I even saw how God worked in that. But yeah, I mean, and Natalie was a big help at that time because she kind of helped me keep perspective when my grandmother was dying. She went through all that with me.
Oh, so that was your wife that gave you that ultimatum?
It was.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
good. I mean, I wasn't really going to ask, but you said it.
Yeah, no. Most of the other girls that I dated, they wouldn't have cared if I went
Not
to church or not.
necessarily pointing you to Jesus.
That's how I knew that Natalie was the one, because she was different. So the church was significant and very helpful in that time to me. It really helped me process that in a way that I quickly said, okay, God is here. God is in this. God's carried me through this. And the fact that I had someone like my grandmother in my life at all was God. So that was helpful. But for about a year, I really kind of wandered and thought, I don't know about this stuff. Fast forward to when I left Kentucky. So for about a 2-year period, I was really struggling with whether to resign and do something different. And I couldn't, because we're in the system we're in some ways too. And I was even when I was independent at Centenary in Lexington, it was still this, I was trained for this kind of secretive thing. You don't talk about what's going to happen next. You have to keep it all under wraps. That's how they trained us in United Methodist churches. There's a real secretive kind of thing that happens about appointments and all that stuff. So there were a couple of people I was talking to about that I really trusted. And one was a guy who started out as my counselor, is now a great friend of mine, named Michael Robards. He knew for a long time that I was struggling with that. And so it got harder and harder to the point that I thought, am I supposed to resign? Am I not supposed to resign? And so finally God said, well, let me help you out with that. So it happened. And it's an interesting way it happened. But it was at the same time that I was struggling with that doubt. And I was thinking, okay, God, what's next? Because I wasn't special. A lot of pastors were dealing with this stuff because of the denominational junk we were going through. So I had friends who were also dealing with those kinds of things. So I didn't think God was being mean to me, but I did, for the first time in a long time, not have clarity. And I was really wrestling with God through that. But I just kind of at one point, and again, Natalie helped me with this. I just said, okay, just let me sit and wait. And I have my doubts about some things right now, but I need to let God work. And I would say that although the church was a source of pain in that season, it also was a source of this truth that I kind of came to that I'd never had before, because so many people in the church, not only my friends who were Christians, but people that I had ministered to, came around me, encouraged me, and said, you're not by yourself. We're here for you. So in both instances, the church was really helpful to me. That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that question, because I never thought about it. Because I know, being a pastor, as you know, when you hear people's doubt stories, the church sometimes wasn't helpful.
Exactly, and that's
But
exactly
it was for me.
That's exactly where we're carrying this. Because I would say for me, in the season that I laid out, I needed to separate myself from the church for a second, because I had an identity issue that led to my faith.
Yes.
So I'm sure you, or at least if another pastor is listening, or really, I think this applies to any Christian. I think we are too quick to put labels on ourselves. And so I very quickly said, at my core, I am a pastor. That's who I am. And even that wasn't true. And I think we can even say, I'm a Christian. At my core, that's who I am. And I think that's just not deep enough. And that's a construct of the world. And that's a title the world gives us. And when it failed me, I didn't have anything to fall on because I hadn't gone deep enough with my identity as a child of God yet.
Yes.
And so I needed to step away from my working relationship with the church. So I needed to step away from me being a pastor for a second and detach myself from that in order to find out how to truly engage with the church on a personal level. Because as you know, you're always taught as a pastor, especially in the United Methodist Church, hey, don't fully engage. Don't stay at arm's length from your congregation. One, because you could be moved.
Many
Two,
times I was
because,
given that advice, which is really bad advice.
Well, because I think it leads to, okay, well, I'm the pastor and they're the church members. There's a distinction between the two of us, so I can't engage in the church as fully as they should.
Yeah.
But then I think on the flip, you have people in the church who are thinking, well, I can't fully engage in the church because I'm not as spiritual as XYZ.
Yeah.
And so I think, to your point, you've seen a lot of reasons or a lot of instances where the church isn't helpful. And I think a lot of people leave the church not really because of their doubt, but because the church doesn't seem to have a lot of room for their doubt. And so they feel boxed out in a sense where they're having all this doubt and there's no place where they can really facilitate it. But then the place you turn, like I mentioned, kind of the personal spirituality can also fail in a sense. So in this, there's room for prayer, obviously, but and so you made this point. You said that you were wrestling with God a lot through this, and so I think a lot of people's experience in doubt is that it just hits the ceiling. So explain a little bit about your own experience and how your doubt actually you felt like it pushed through that ceiling in terms of prayer, because I think that'll be really helpful to people.
Well, doubt, I think, especially in a Christian's life, can be blinding because we do have this inner kind of desire to say, okay, God, I'm a Christian. I know Scripture. I love you. I believe that you're here for me. I believe that you'll help me. So we got that going on. And then when it doesn't happen, it's like, okay, God, where are you? You know, I believe, and where are you? And it really is. And let me say this too. I think doubt is not a horrible thing. As a matter of fact, I think without doubt, you can't have faith. And the doubt that you walk through, and especially when you get past it, your faith is even stronger. At least that was my experience. That's what it should be. I think that's healthy. And I was blinded, really, especially in that second instance, because, you know, my career, my vocation was wrapped up in my spirituality, which is not the case for a lot of people. You know, I was a vocational pastor. So I was blinded, though, because of that in ways, because God had given me so many avenues, and He was answering me in my struggles, but I didn't want to hear that answer. So the doubt was because of my blindness, because like I was saying, my friend Michael, he kept kind of trying to lead me. He didn't want to just come out and say it, but he knew that I didn't need to be where I was. That was really what was going on. And I remember the day I resigned, I drove to Louisville to his office that very day. I walked in and said, I just turned in my resignation. And all he said was, congratulations. And I mean, seriously. And I was just like, well, I didn't expect him to say that. But it was because I was blaming God for a lot of things that He was trying to do, but I didn't want to see that. And so I grew in that time, just like even back to when I dealt with my grandmother's situation. I grew in that time as a result of tremendous pain and being unsettled. And the other thing I think doubt does for us, Taylor, is that it can be a clarifying piece of life when God is really trying to get us to wait. Because so much of our Christian life is waiting. And we hate that as humans. We hate waiting, especially now with the technology that we have at our fingertips. We don't have to wait for a whole lot. But God has not changed. God did not change with technology. He still moves slow and steady. And a lot of times he says, wait. And those two periods of doubt in my life could have done me in spiritually, but it actually took me to the next level. So that's why I think doubt is important. And a lot of times people stop before they get to the good stuff, and they live in that doubt for a lot longer than they need to. And I don't know, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where I am in that. Anyway, that's my personal experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful because I think it shows that there are different sides of doubt. And if you're listening, you've probably noticed, at least if you're listening and you know some of the popular terms that are used for doubt, like deconstruction, we're avoiding those terms because that's not necessarily what we're talking about. Well, it's a bit loaded and it's been popularized in a way that's not really helpful to, especially to Christians who are experiencing doubt. Like, deconstruction is an entirely different state of being.
Yes.
You can doubt and still have your faith intact, which honestly, from what I'm hearing from you, you can doubt and you're still holding on to your faith, because what doubt is doing is doubt is stripping away certainty. It's stripping away the things that you think you know to be true and really replacing it with relationship.
Yes.
And what comes back might be a little bit smaller, honestly. Like your faith might be a little bit smaller, but it's way more personal.
Yes.
Because in my experience too, I mean, as a pastor, I thought I was building my faith up to be this big thing that could be modeled and emulated and shared. And really, I was just trying to find certainty in something that has a limited amount of certainty.
Yes.
And so I think what we're really encouraging people to do is to lean into the doubt, because it leads to what is most essential in your faith, and that's the relationship that you have with Jesus Christ. So I think maybe something that could be helpful is there's some scripture that this can really be anchored in. Some of the scripture that we are basing this off of would be things like Psalm 22. And I guess this also shows that there's a lot of doubt in the Bible, which is so helpful, because even if, I mean, gosh, if you look at just the book of Psalms, out of 150 Psalms, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% are Psalms of doubt or lament, or questioning or something like that. So Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? I mean, how many times can we resonate with that and think, yeah, I've said that a couple times in my life. It really feels like God's not here. It really feels like there's a lack of presence. Or you have John 20 where, I mean, doubting Thomas, right? That's a classic example. Thomas is like, well, where are the wounds? I want to see. He wanted certainty. And in the resurrection of Jesus, we were just having this conversation the other night with some of our young adults. One of them was mentioning, I don't really need all the evidence because that was 2,000 years ago. So the evidence is a bit arbitrary to me.
Yeah.
I need to experience it. And so even that, our doubting now is beyond Thomas's doubting, because at least Thomas had the evidence right there in front of him. It's like, oh, you have the wounds in your hand. Well, that's not going to be helpful today.
Yeah.
And so it's more of the experience, more leading people towards relationships. Habakkuk, how long, Lord, must I call for help? And in Mark 9:24, I believe, help my unbelief. So that pretty much gives you the whole gamut of scripture to say there's not just room for doubt, but doubt is welcomed. And to your point, God answers it. Maybe not always in the way that we want him to, but he still answers it. So,
and I think blessings are directly attached to that sometimes too.
Right.
Blessed are those who believe but haven't seen. And that's a wonderful promise, I think. And I get, with these finite brains we have, I mean, we want to see it. We want to see it. But the blessings don't come when it's right there at your nose. I think the blessings come when you truly understand that doubt is just a part of life, but faith is bigger than doubt.
Absolutely. That's good.
And that's where, I guess that's been a bedrock in my ministry as I try to encourage people, which made it harder for me when I was in my own doubt, because it was like, you got to practice what you've been preaching.
Absolutely.
That's what Natalie said to me when we were going through some stuff. She was like, okay, now we've got to practice what we've been preaching all these years. And I said, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so here's your invitation this week. Not challenge, just an invitation. So take this if you feel so inclined. So write down one question you've been afraid to ask about your faith. and really just one. We're not saying you have to put a whole laundry list, and you don't even have to show it to anyone. You don't have to answer it. Just let yourself be willing to ask it honestly, because we want you to hear from this, and we want you to show yourself that there is room for doubt in the church, and questions that you're afraid to ask have power over you. And when you write them down, they really are what they are, and they're just questions. So, James, do you have anything else to add on doubt while we wrap this thing up?
Well, I just think that we need to really emphasize that Jesus is the way. And that sounds like a cute little ditty, as you'd probably call it.
I said that one time, and now everyone thinks it's like my word.
But seriously, Jesus is the way. And he is the way in every situation that we come up against in this life. And I've been at the bottom rung, and I've been at the top of the heap spiritually. And one thing I know is that as long as I keep my eyes focused on him, as long as I cry out in agony to him and not the world, I'm going to be okay. And you mentioned the Psalms. That's a great example of that. Moses is a marvelous example of that. I mean, the guy really was just at the bottom of the heap. And yet, he kept moving toward God. And now we still talk about him after all these years. And we could name person after person in Scripture. But Jesus is the only way. And it's more than just a little pithy saying. It is the absolute truth. And it is the remedy for any doubt that we can have.
Which is such an interesting way to end, because our next episode is going to be titled, Is Jesus the Only Way? And really discuss the idea around what room do we have in our faith for other religions, other spirituality. How do we reconcile that those things still exist with our own faith that does proclaim Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life? So we'll do that next week. But we hope this conversation's been helpful to you, and we hope that you'll share it with others so that it can be meaningful to them too. And as always, you can find us on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, and on our website at graceresurrection.org. We'd love for you to join us each week as we continue to put out new episodes of the Grace and Truth podcast. But until next time, may the good Lord bless and keep you.
Till we meet again.